This is the North Miami Planning Commission meeting on Tuesday, September 2nd, 2014 at 7 p.m. in council chambers. Let us stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Roll call the board members, please. Gentlemen, come on up front, have a seat. Don't sit in the back. You'll miss it all.
Kevin Seifert,
Present.
Charles Ernst,
Present.
Kenny Each,
Present.
Gene Castor,
Gene is excused.
Jason James,
Present.
Bill Previtel.
Present.
Do we have any amendments to the agenda tonight?
None.
None. Thank you. There are no communications and no continued public hearings. Therefore, we move on to PC 09-14. Oh, did we? Oh, we forgot about that, didn't we? Thank you. Approval of minutes. Do we have minutes to be signed? Do we have
Motion to approve the minutes.
All right, Bill Previtel moves to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Kenny H. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. You don't have a signature page on this. Does it matter to you? Did we leave that out somewhere in drafting this? Did we change the format?
I think that page 4 is missing. That's the signature page.
Uh-huh. Well, okay. Well, we'll just go ahead and sign on what's listed as 3 or 4, and you can work it out later.
We'll work it out.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, now, public hearings, item 5, PC 09-14. A resolution of the Vice Mayor as acting mayor and City Council of the City of North Miami, Florida, making certain findings and designating the real property identified by Miami-Dade County Folio number 06-2219-000-1620 as further identified by the map in the attached Exhibit A as a brownfield area pursuant to Section 376.80 Florida statutes for the purpose of environmental rehabilitation, job creation, and promoting economic redevelopment. Authorizing the city manager to notify the Florida Department of Environmental Protection of said designation, providing for an effective date and for all other purposes. Staff report, please.
Respected board members, staff requests that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the proposed resolution designating the 6,319-acre property owned by the city and formerly also known as the Rux Park, located at 13780 Northeast 5th Avenue, North Miami, Miami-Dade County, Florida 33161, folio number 062219-000-1620, the subject property, as a brownfield area and forward to City Council for final approval. We have attorney Michael Goldstein here to give a presentation and answer any questions that the board may have.
Before we proceed, as a point of order, I believe the acreage is 6 acres, or slightly over. Well, it's 6 point something, yeah, right, according to the survey. Thank you.
All right, before we get into the gentleman here, we'll open the public hearing for the record, and at an appropriate time, we'll invite anyone to come up and speak after the presentation. Go ahead, sir. You have the microphone. Please introduce yourself.
Fabulous. My name is Michael Goldstein. I'm with the law firm of the Goldstein Environmental Law Firm, and I'm pleased to be here today on behalf of the City of North Miami to support staff's presentation in support of the pending resolution designating Rucks Park a brownfield area pursuant to Chapter 376.80 Florida statutes at SEC. By way of background, Rucks Park, which was formerly operated in connection with the city's wastewater treatment plant, has some legacy environmental issues that need to be fully assessed and remediated. This is a process that's laid out in both the Miami-Dade County Code and the Florida Administrative Code. And the City of North Miami has been doing a very good job of complying with those regulations and working through what ultimately will be a lengthy, iterative regulatory process to achieve delineation or documentation of the full nature and extent of contamination in soil and groundwater, and ultimately design and implement a cleanup approach, also referred to as a remediation plan. This process is lengthy, it's expensive, it's time-consuming, it creates risk, and it creates a significant financial burden for the city, as well as creating obstacles to redevelopment both on-site for whatever uses the Planning Commission and the City Commission ultimately decide, and also inhibits rehabilitation and sustainable reuse of adjacent properties, which we frequently find in South Florida when developers and end users and community advocates and lenders are faced with issues of contamination and working through the regulatory process. Thankfully, the state of Florida in 1997, along with a broad group of private and public stakeholders, created a program designed to help manage the risk and mitigate the cost of going through this cleanup process. And in doing so, and by creating a whole toolbox of incentives, which I'll discuss in short order, the state has created a very favorable environment for local governments and private parties to actually embrace these sites, invest capital, accelerate cleanup, expand public health protection, and achieve a whole series of very important public policy benefits that I know we want to see here in the city and that the Planning Commission also wants to see. This particular project, Rucks Park, is the first of what I believe will be several brownfield designations brought before the Planning Commission and ultimately the city for your consideration. Again, why are we doing this? Why is city staff recommending this? And why are we here supporting the city's recommendation in favor of the designation? Because doing so creates important incentives, lowers obstacles to redevelopment, and accelerates cleanup and expands job creation and a number of other wonderful things. That's where, if I may, I want to get into this presentation a little bit. It's a very lengthy presentation, and I'm not going to go through all of it. But what I want to start with is a brief overview of some of the financial incentives that will be triggered if and when this Planning Commission approves the resolution before it and sends the resolution on to the City Commission for final action. Because 2 public hearings are required under state law in order for this resolution to be adopted. And we are here today to work through the first public hearing. So in terms of the incentives that exist, there are tax credits that the state of Florida makes available for cleanup, Florida corporate income tax credits as a way to subsidize the cost of cleanup that responsible parties would otherwise bear, sometimes disproportionately, especially where the party who now owns the contaminated property wasn't directly responsible for causing the contamination. So we have a tax credit that's very important. There is a tax refund on construction materials where affordable housing is built or workforce housing is built in a designated brownfield area. And I believe that staff is looking at a number of options for reuse of Rucks Park. Certainly maintaining some of the property for recreation and conservation and open space, which the community desperately needs, But also, I understand there's been some discussion and analysis about whether the site would be appropriate for affordable or workforce housing. In my experience, that's something that has been very successful across the state on brownfield sites. There are a number of very good and reputable and proven affordable housing developers who I think would be exceedingly excited to come into this community, invest capital, and help make Rucks Park a success. This incentive is a great way to attract good developers, and I'll go into that in more detail in short order. And then, in addition to some of the financial incentives, there are very important regulatory incentives that will be available to the city if the designation is approved and the city then proceeds to enter into a specific cleanup agreement with Miami-Dade County. A brief aside about that agreement. And my assumption is that this commission is very sophisticated with how cleanups are implemented in the state of Florida, given the city's experience with the Biscayne Landing site, formerly Munisport. Both the State Department of Environmental Protection and Miami-Dade County have equal and separate grants of regulatory authority to enforce their own respective pollution control codes. In this instance, as in every other instance, both the state and the county have equal jurisdiction, although the county has been in the lead from day one. The Miami-Dade County Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources, an agency that you may recall as being referred to historically as the Department of Environmental Resources Management, or DERM. They've gone through some consolidation, and now they're referred to equally as DERM or DRER. The larger point here is this, that by adopting this resolution and then proceeding to enter into a cleanup agreement with the county as the state's agent, because that's the way this program has been set up. If a delegation agreement has been executed between a county pollution control agency and the state, the county takes on two hats, both its own hat and the state's hat. And so you will be streamlining the cleanup process by only working through one agency, and at the same time making the site eligible for important regulatory incentives like liability protection. Why could that be important? That could be important because as this property works through the iterative or sequential cleanup process, and right now we're in the assessment process or the investigation stage, to fully get our arms around the extent and nature of contamination horizontally and vertically, and then as the project moves into cleanup, the city is spending good money. We've got great staff devoting its time to prosecuting the cleanup, and the city is spending a tremendous amount of money, and the Planning Commission is taking its time to understand these issues, and certainly the City Commission. As this process unfolds, it may be the case that a third party comes in, and notwithstanding all of the sophistication and time and effort and money, they may have another idea of how a separate idea, a contrary idea of how the cleanup should proceed, and may bring in a lawyer and or threaten legal action, which could create an unnecessary and needless obstacle to completing the task at hand for the city. The protection that would be triggered by executing this cleanup agreement would safeguard the integrity of whatever plan the city negotiates with the county, acting on its own behalf and acting on the state's behalf. And this protection is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. To the contrary, it is a contract between the city and the county and the state through the county that binds the city more closely to the cleanup, establishing definitive timeframes and creating a definitive course of action for investigation and cleanup. So as you can see, these are all very important reasons to adopt this brownfield resolution. On the one hand, the city will be getting economic incentives, and I'm going to go into those economic incentives in more detail shortly, and liability protection. And there are other aspects to both the financial incentive package that becomes available, as well as to the regulatory package that becomes available. But I don't want to get too lost in the details unless, of course, you commissioners want more detail, in which case I'd be happy to provide more detail. Just very, very briefly, with respect to tax credits, because this is where the city gets to recapture money that would otherwise be lost and gets to pull money back into the general revenue fund that would otherwise disappear forever. So in the lower left-hand corner of this slide before you, you will see a matrix. This is a tax credit matrix, and it is intended to provide a shorthand explanation for how tax credits are awarded based on dollars that a responsible party spends on cleanup. I'm going to be very brief and hopefully very clear and concise.
May I interrupt you for a second?
Yes, sir.
We have a page that is different than what yours is there. Some of the items in our packet that we got,
Yes, sir.
I see that it doesn't match your.
Well, the summary of the available tax credits should match up. The one-page summary you have goes into a little more detail about the various other financial incentives that exist and could be available for this project. What I'm trying to do is emphasize the highlights or the incentives that are most likely to be most relevant to the city in the short term. Okay? And if my explanation doesn't satisfy you after I'm done, I'm happy to entertain questions about what you see on the sheet that may not be reflected in my presentation.
Please continue, sir.
Okay. So, in short, or in sum, the process would unfold like this, and this is how these dollars get recaptured by the city. The designation is approved on first reading if it's this planning commission's will. The resolution then goes to the second hearing before the city commission. If it is also adopted, the site becomes a brownfield area and eligible to enter into this contract that I discussed, this cleanup agreement with the Miami-Dade County Department of Regulatory and Economic Resources. This cleanup agreement has a special name. It's called a Brownfield Site Rehabilitation Agreement. And the term site rehabilitation is just a fancy term for contamination, investigation, and remediation. Once that agreement is in place, and part of our scope was to draft the agreement and begin to negotiate it with the county. We've already done that. We've drafted it, and your legal department is reviewing the sufficiency of our work. And in short order, once we liaison with your very good city attorney and assistant city attorney, we'll move forward in negotiating the agreement. But assuming the agreement is executed with the county, we then have the ability to start recapturing dollars that are spent out of the general revenue fund. And here's the recapture rate. For every dollar that the city spends, every single year that the city spends on cleanup, every eligible dollar on cleanup that the city spends every single year that cleanup is required, the city will be eligible for 50 cents on the dollar in Florida corporate income tax credits. Okay? So, if the city spends, we're going to make the math very easy. If the city spends $100,000 in year one, the city will be eligible for a $50,000 Florida corporate income tax credit. If the city then spends in year two another $100,000, it's entitled to another 50% tax credit. And this tax credit is eligible into infinity. God forbid the cleanup takes 10 years, we would be eligible to an annual tax credit each of those 10 years. At the end of the process, and for purposes of this explanation, let's assume that the cleanup is completed within 2 years. We get our no further action designation from the county at the end of year two. The city would then be eligible for a bonus tax credit, okay? We have this bonus tax credit in the matrix of another 25% of the total cost of cleanup over that 2-year period. So in my example, we spent $100,000 in year one and $100,000 in year two. That's a $200,000 cleanup. So we now would be eligible for 25% of that total 2-year cleanup, or another $50,000. So we receive $50,000 in year one, $50,000 in year two, and $50,000 at the end of year two, or $150,000 Florida corporate income tax credit on a $200,000 cleanup, which gives you a 75% yield. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, the city can't use Florida corporate income tax credits. These tax credits, by law, by design, for this very purpose, are assignable. And there is a very robust secondary market for these tax credits. And they are being sold and monetized at the rate of between 80 and 90 cents on the dollar. There are dozens and dozens of local governments, counties and cities, and CRAs for that matter, and LLCs for that matter, who have successfully applied for these tax credits and gone out and sold them on the secondary market. And I have, I'm not going to go through this analysis, but what I've done is I've taken you through various scenarios to show how the dollar that you spend on cleanup, which otherwise would be gone forever, disappearing into the ether, gets recaptured. But what I do want to show you is this is a list of local government entities that successfully applied for tax credits as of June 2013. And you can see that some have applied for and successfully been awarded hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax credits. And that's a great service to their residents because, again, they're capturing this money that would be gone forever. There's another option, by the way, and that is because these tax credits are assignable, they can simply be assigned to a third party who may be able to utilize 100% of the value as a way to further incentivize that party, or to write down debt that the city may otherwise have. For example, the city may have a general contractor that pays millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars in corporate income tax credits and may take an assignment in lieu of cash, in which case the city would be realizing 100 cents on the dollar. And that's legal and it's contemplated by the statute. Now the story actually gets better because there's an additional bonus that the city may avail itself of if it develops Rucks Park in part, reuses Rucks Park in part for either affordable or workforce housing or for a community health clinic, a community health facility. In that instance, there is another 25% bonus, which would take the total yield on the cleanup to 100 cents on the dollar. If you spend $100,000 on cleanup, you're going to get a $100,000 tax credit back. Now, there are some caps on that, which I can go into if you like, but stated generally, you're not allowed to be awarded more than $500,000 in any given year for your annual cleanup tax credit, or more than $500,000 in the aggregate for your cleanup bonus tax credit. So what does that mean effectively, functionally? What it means is this. It's very simple and very easy to intuit. If the city spends more than $1 million in a given year on cleanup, it starts to leave money on the table because the recapture rate is 50 cents on the dollar up to $500,000. So what does this mean practically for the city? If we're required to go out there and spend $2 million to pull out dirty soil from the property, by the way, I don't think that's going to happen. I'm not the environmental consultant. You have a very good environmental consultant who's working on that end. But if that were the case, or if the city wanted to apply this perhaps to Biscayne Landing, if the city were looking at a $2 million cleanup task item and spent that full $2 million in a given year, it would essentially leave $1 million of that value on the table because the cap in any given year is $500,000. And so what we would help you do is we would help you sequence the cleanup to push maybe the second half of that soil removal work to the next calendar year. That's just an aside and part of how we're helping the city. But what I'm hopeful is that this explanation gives you a sense for how important the designation is, because we're going to recapture a tremendous amount of cash and put it back in the general revenue fund that would otherwise be lost forever. The other financial incentive that I want to focus on is this. I mentioned that there's a special tax incentive for affordable and workforce housing developers. It's very important, and it can be very attractive and to developers, and in turn cause sophisticated, experienced, proven developers to come into your community and build and create a wonderful result, help to reach a wonderful result. The incentive is this: in a designated brownfield area with an executed brownfield site rehabilitation agreement, if a developer comes in and builds a project that has a component that's either affordable or workforce housing, that developer will be entitled to a 100% sales tax refund on construction materials. That is a very significant tax refund in light of the total construction budget for the types of projects we're seeing and the type of project that you would likely see here in the city of North Miami, to the extent that you deemed it appropriate to encourage that type of reuse or that component of reuse for Rucks Park. Just as an example, if you look at a $30 million total construction budget, which is not a huge project for affordable or workforce housing, the rule of thumb, by and large, is that 30 to 40% of the total construction budget is for eligible construction materials. We've used the lower end of that range to be conservative. That gives you a $9 million eligible building materials cost budget. And at a 6% sales tax rate, we throw out the 1% county surcharge, because that 1% county surcharge falls away after the first $5,000. And again, we want to be very conservative. That creates a $540,000 cash refund back to the developer that doesn't come out of the general revenue fund for the city. But what you've done, simply through a paper transaction, by approving this resolution and entering into the agreement, which, by the way, doesn't obligate the city to do any more cleanup than it otherwise is obligated to do currently, you've made this important incentive available. And I think further assuring that you are going to get a quality developer, if in fact that's what you want. And I'm not here to tell you what's appropriate. Of course, that's within your portfolio. There is a lot more that we can say about brownfields, and a lot more that I like to say, because as you can tell, this is a subject which I'm not only passionate about, but I've seen firsthand over the past 23 years result in tremendous progress for communities just like the city of North Miami. Again, accelerating environmental protection, expanding public health protection, creating jobs, and other important economic redevelopment metrics. This brownfield program is tried and true. We are not pioneers here. We are not innovators. There is nothing untoward about this or speculative. Since 1997, there have been over 367 designations, brownfield designations, throughout the state, covering over 251,000 acres. These metrics are as current as last month, October 4th. The largest designated area is 14,190 acres. The smallest designated area, by the way, is here in the city of North Miami for a client of ours, Land South. It's an old gas station that's being redeveloped on off of 125th. And then in terms of brownfield sites that have executed cleanup agreements, well, you can see the metrics here. 202 sites with executed cleanup agreements. One final metric, and then I'll take questions unless you would like me to drill down even further and talk about the various federal programs that are available to provide grant funding and the design documents and guidance documents that have been promulgated at the federal, state, and local level to help bodies just like this Planning Commission take a situation like Rucks Park and create a very important and positive result. What this next slide and last slide, prior to taking any questions, demonstrates is the amount of private capital that follows brownfield designations. These metrics are from the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity and from Enterprise Florida, which tracks capital investment for designated brownfield sites. And as you can see, 2012, 2013 was a banner year for private capital investment, over $823 million. And at this point, I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right, members of the commission, questions, please.
Mr. Chair, just as a point to make here. There's an exhibit that Mr. Goldstein would like for you to have
Right.
and for your consideration as well. This is a schedule. Thank you, and I apologize for the interruption.
All right, Jason, would you like to lead us off on questions?
Yes. Since you have a schedule, well, my first question was, I mean, has there been any like type of geotechnical report done, subsurface exploration done up until this point?
That's a great question. I can't speak to how much geotechnical work has been done, but I can speak to the amount of environmental investigation that has been done. There's been a tremendous amount of environmental assessment done to date. There are up to 4 specifically identified areas that have their own unique soil and groundwater contamination issues.
Okay.
That investigation is ongoing. Ultimately, when the county determines that the investigation is complete and deems it sufficient, they will then allow the city to prepare and submit a remedial action plan. The remedial action plan will be based in large part on the proposed reuse, because many times the actual physical redevelopment of the site ties into the type of remediation that is best to propose and that works most effectively. And as an aside, I'm glad you asked this question, Commissioner. The tax credit, the way in which the tax credit was designed, it is broad enough to encompass certain construction activities. So, for example, if it's deemed appropriate to maintain some residual volume of contaminated soil on site beneath an encapsulation structure like a parking lot, or 2 feet of clean fill and landscaped areas, or maybe even underneath a building foundation or building pad, a percentage of the cost of that foundation or landscaping or parking lot will be eligible for tax credits. It's what I call the environmental development windfall.
Okay. And those, I guess, what you found so far, they just, I guess, DERM or RER, they just have to monitor it for a certain period of time before they can tell you, okay, now go ahead and implement your plan. Is that what you're saying?
It's a good question. It's almost like that. Because the city is a responsible party, the city must do what is required to undertake the same type of investigation that any responsible party would have to undertake. It's the city's obligation to go out and take soil samples and groundwater samples and sediment samples and determine the nature of contamination in the subsurface and its extent, and put all of its findings into a report.
Okay.
And then submit that report with a demonstration that the investigation is complete and all of the contaminants have been identified, and the full extent of the contamination has also been documented. And when that report is submitted, the county, acting again on its own behalf as well as the state's behalf, will look at that document and either agree with the city's consultant and say, you've done a great job, we think you have your arms around the situation, or they may say, you're almost there, go back out and do a little more. And that's not uncommon, that the county and or the state may ask for some additional work. And so whatever report had been submitted originally will be supplemented pursuant to an addendum. Ultimately, though, the county will determine that a sufficient investigation has been achieved, because the city has very good consultants, and will then authorize the city to submit a cleanup plan. As part of that cleanup plan, Commissioner, and this gets to your question or your point, the cleanup plan will likely have some period of monitoring for maybe less than a year or maybe many years until certain cleanup standards are achieved. Whatever cleanup is ultimately required of the city will be pursuant to standards that are codified in law and backed by good science to make sure that the cleanup is fully protective of human health and the environment.
That's all I have.
Mr. Prevotel?
Yeah, may I ask, you touched on something, if I could ask for further clarification, and you threw them out as remedies for contaminated soil, and that is encapsulation. You know, we know that from asbestos and such, you want to wrap it and make it so it's non-friable and
Right.
out into the atmosphere. And so for a soil contaminant, a way of encapsulating might be, as you point out, a parking lot. And I think you also mentioned possibly 2 feet of clean topsoil and then vegetation on that. Is that a across-the-board remedy, or it is not, correct? If the contaminant is deep, that alone would not remedy the situation, right? We're talking about removing the soil and just using this as a final coat.
Well, the answer is you are correct. There are many options available. There will be many options available to the city to achieve a rehabilitated site. One of those options may be some form of encapsulation. Another form of option may be some volume of contaminated soil removal. Another form of treatment or remediation could be active treatment of contamination within the soil itself to remove the contaminants. It's too early in the process to say what's ultimately going to be proposed and what the city deems appropriate.
Right. So
It's a combination, I apologize for interrupting. It's a combination of science and policy. Your consultants will tell you what options you have based on the science. Your environmental lawyer will tell you whether the options proposed to you by the consultant are available, and then the city gets to make a policy decision regarding which way it wants to go. And I suspect that that policy decision will be a combination of what's appropriate, what's efficient, what's practical, and what's protective.
Okay, and I guess the follow-up is, are we far enough along on the observations and reports on this site to be able to determine the level of contaminants to possibly ballpark what might be required? Have there been test borings and such that take place that could say, yes, this encapsulation with paving could work, or yes, 2 feet of soil could work? Are we anywhere near that point?
Commissioner, that's a very good question. I've reviewed the existing data. There's a tremendous amount of data. I'm not the city's environmental consultant, and so I don't want to get over my skis here and speak outside of my portfolio. What I would like to do is go back to staff and have staff request that at your next meeting, the environmental consultant come and speak to those technical issues.
Okay, because I was just trying to possibly get a better handle on the scope and cost of it. If we had for the cost of doing the observations, the reports, you might know if this is a relatively easy and manageable project within a price range, or if it becomes, you know, a magnitude of 10 times that.
Which I wanted to follow up, if I may, with, we're getting back to the tax credit issue with this. We're already running tests, we're already,
Yes.
I take it we're already generating some expenses to
Yes,
the
sir.
city.
Yes, sir.
So where is it that the lines will meet that we won't start, where we won't be owing so much to get this project done, and that we get ahead of the curve on this?
That's a great question. One of the benefits of adopting this resolution is that once the resolution is in place and the Brownfield Agreement is executed, there is a look-back provision that allows the city to apply for tax credits for all costs incurred going back to January 1 of this calendar year. So all of the money that's been spent in this calendar year can be captured and submitted as a tax credit application. And we'll also go into the ultimate tax credit application, or the bonus tax credit application, when the cleanup is certified as being complete.
Because it's sort of like we're living on a credit card here, essentially, correct?
Yeah.
And we're hoping that
Actually, I
that
think
with
it's,
the tax incentives, that these rates will be acceptable down the road, that you've mentioned with people wanting to invest in these tax credits.
I think it's a wonderful metaphor. Let me offer a friendly amendment to that. I think it's also like living from paycheck to paycheck, because we're spending money now
Right,
with no hope of getting any of it back.
right.
But with this designation and then entering into this contract, which again doesn't require us to do anything more than we're already required to do by statute, you automatically put in place a process that allows me to go out and recapture at least no less than 75% of what you're spending and will never otherwise recapture.
But as Mr. Prevotel pointed out, there is a factor of not knowing that we may in fact not have as much contaminants, and we might get off of having to pay extra costs. But then there's that danger of finding extra contaminants and them coming back to us and saying, we need more for cleanup. It's
Well,
gonna take longer.
I can see,
So
I,
we're kind of caught in this situation where we're playing I wanna know if we're going to be caught in the situation of playing catch-up down the road, and our grandchildren will be subject to this.
well, because you're a responsible party and subject to remediation liability, regardless of whether this designation passes or not, there is a time frame that has been triggered requiring compliance with these iterative regulatory tasks. And so this is not something that can be put off for many, many years. This process will likely be, my best informed estimate is that the investigation process will not go for longer than 1 more year, and maybe even not longer than 6 additional months. And once that investigation process is done, a remediation plan will likely be put together, submitted within 90 days, and approved within 60 to 120 days. As with the contamination investigation process, the county may look at your cleanup plan and say, we like points 1, 2, 4, and 7, but we want you to think a little harder about points 3, 5, and 6 and come back with an amendment. That's not unusual either. But the process of going through the investigation, the cleanup planning, cleanup implementation, that train, sir, has left the station and will be done in relatively short order.
So effectively, if I understand what we're looking at here, the real goal is to recover the tax credits on the money we've already spent.
And will spend in the future.
And will spend going forward. Regardless of where we are on definitive reports tonight, the goal is to position ourselves to recover these tax credits for this calendar year.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. As well as to position the property to be incentivized for any future developer.
Some point indefinite time into the future.
That's right. As well as to position the city to take advantage of important liability protection, to protect the integrity of whatever cleanup agreement the city enters into with the county. It may be the policy decision of this board and of the city commission to go with a cleanup that heavily emphasizes an encapsulation methodology. It may not be, but it may be. To the extent that it is, and a third party comes in and wants something above and beyond that you feel as a body and the commission feel is not appropriate, the agreement we're talking about, again, would protect the sanctity of that remediation plan that was negotiated with the county.
Yeah, I think you'll get support, at least from me, and I think the rest. I think we're all in favor of the removing contaminants and having a better environment. I think it's a great pitch in terms of the tax incentives. There are many nice incentives there. The liability is all very attractive. I think there's a little reluctance. If we gave you a positive vote now, is this a train that can never be stopped regardless of what the next
No, sir.
point of cost is? Or will it be another point where we can reevaluate that we have this report, here's what the report said on the contaminants, and this is going to be the cost, or this is the range of cost? Will we be allowed that, as opposed to being on the hook for saying yes to something and having it just be skyrocketing out of control?
It's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because there's an important distinction to make here. By approving this resolution on first hearing and subsequently on second hearing, the city doesn't obligate itself to do anything, period. And it doesn't impact whatsoever on whatever remediation plan is ultimately proposed, is brought before you, accepted, rejected, modified as you give direction to your technical consultants. They are completely separate, completely delinked. All of this does, again, is create a more sound and beneficial regulatory and financial environment, as well as allow you to recapture tax dollars, put it back in the general revenue fund or wherever you want to put it.
Okay,
I have one.
and it's just what I asked, and staff concurs with that we have that in writing,
You know-
those assurances that it is a staged development, that if there is some reluctance further down the line, that it can be reevaluated?
I think that would be part of the scope of services with the environmental consultant and the Goldstein Law Firm.
Okay.
And my final question is whether whether this gets approved or not, we still have to remediate the site no matter what. This
Exactly. Yes,
just
sir.
this just
Exactly.
gives us all those incentives
That's right.
to go with it.
That's right.
We
Gives us a partial recovery strategy against the costs.
And perhaps a full recovery strategy, depending on the ultimate reuse of Rucks Park.
If I may, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Goldstein, the big ticket item for me is it's not just the tax credits, but also that unknown liability that we have hanging over our heads that's potentially unlimited.
Can you explain that to us?
Well, according to the statute, and I believe Mr. Goldstein has just indicated, by designating this property, there are certain liability protections that will kick in for third-party litigants that may come in and, file claims against the city for this perceived or actual contamination on this property. So, to me, that's an unknown that we will be taking care of.
So once the
designating.
brownfield designation kicks in, it's sort of like a lis pendens in a foreclosure. It's a designation that you've got a problem on this site, and it protects the city from monetary cleanup damage claims from a potential purchaser.
And the only difference is the list pendants is recorded. That would not be, but yes, it's a
otherwise,
good
yes,
analogy. Yes, sir.
It publicly puts the cloud out there.
Well, no, I'd like to speak to that, because what it does actually is it lifts the cloud. And it lifts the cloud in the following manner. It's already public record that this site is contaminated. All of the cleanup documents, all of the investigation documents, all of the correspondence between the city and the county, including all of the directives from the county to conduct cleanup, are matters of public record. They are freely available both in physical files and in electronic files. And in every Phase 1 environmental site assessment that's prepared for a commercial real estate transaction that's within a certain radius of this property, the issue will come up. There's already a contamination cloud, if you will, or stigma that's acknowledged, that's on record for Rucks Park. What the designation does is it communicates to the world, the financial community, the redevelopment community, third parties, government regulators, government officials, state, federal, local, that the city is committed to a process that accelerates cleanup and creates an environment that's safe for investment of private and public capital. And as a practical matter, on this next slide that I have up, maybe we can get it up on the screen here so that you can see it. There we go. There have actually been objective studies funded by EPA and other third parties that look at the impact on valuation of a brownfields designation and or a brownfields cleanup. And so what you see here, this first report that I've cited, published by Duke University, reflects a 5.1% to 12.8% increase in property values where a brownfield designation has occurred. And then there are some other reports here from EPA and another university where you've also got an increase in property value. So again, I submit for the Commission's consideration that the designation does the opposite of imposing a cloud. It provides a very clear and lighted path to the finish line, to a site that's been remediated, safe for reuse, fully protective of human health and the environment, and eligible for many, many incentives, whether the incentives apply to the city, to a developer, to a future end user, or to the lender for any of these parties.
All right, let me hear from Kenny H. Kenny, I know you probably have thoughts on this.
I think this is a win-win situation. It's thinking outside the box. When this law was passed a number of years ago, it brings together the public and the private sector. and rectifying a very dangerous situation out there, an environmental situation. Now, we can look at the chronology of this. I can remember when the CRA was involved with this thing, and all of a sudden, the elected officials that were up here today said, "Oh my God, this is contaminated land. We were going to build on that. We were going to throw a park out there." And, oh, well, the fact of the matter is, the site is contaminated. It has to be cleaned up. We have an incentive here to bring in additional funds to the city into our general fund. I think it's a win-win situation. I think we should go forward with it. And this is the type of an idea, an original idea like this that we can expand upon and say to the private sector, hey, this is what we're doing out there. You know, you mentioned developers, affordable workforce housing, and we have Little Haiti housing coming in now and taking advantage of things like this and giving our people a quality of life to live in a decent environment. And I'm for it. I think it's a win-win situation. You have my endorsement on it.
All right, well, before we call for a vote, we have a public hearing. At this time, we'd invite members of the public to speak to this issue. Anyone wishing to speak to this issue is invited to come forward, go to the microphone, state your name and address, and give us the benefit of your wisdom or commentary. And I see a lot of nodding heads, but I hear no thundering hooves and no rising cloud of dust, and therefore I shall close the public hearing. Chair calls for motion.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion approved by
Mr. Prevotel.
Mr. Prevotel and a second by Mr. James. All those in favor?
Aye.
Let the record reflect it's unanimous. The motion carries. Thank you very much, Counselor, for your enlightened presentation.
Thank you, Commissioners and Chairman.
May it always go so well. All right, now let's get on to the next item. PC 10-14. A resolution of the Vice Mayor as acting mayor and City Council of the City of North Miami, Florida, approving the vacation, abandonment, closure, and sale of city-owned, unimproved parcels of land consisting of approximately 2,248 and 5,247 square feet, respectively, including a 20-feet wide alleyway consisting of 7,613 square feet, lying south of lots 1A and B of Block 13, Biscayne Highlands subdivision, and adjacent to lots 7 through 13, and further authorizing the city manager to negotiate the sale of the subject property in accordance with Chapter 29, Article 3, Division 9, City of North Miami Code of Ordinances, Land Development Regulations, and to take all necessary steps to effectuate conveyance of the subject property, providing for an effective date and for all other purposes. Staff report, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Staff requests that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the resolution with conditions for the vacation, abandonment, closure, and sale of city-owned unimproved parcels of land totaling 15,108 square feet in size, and forward the said request to City Council for final approval. And for, I believe, a presentation, Mr. Ari Scalar, who is the authorized representative on behalf of the applicant, is present here today and to answer any other questions that the board may have.
Staff, because this is a televised program, would you please read in the background information on this so that the viewers at home get the full benefit of this report?
Certainly. The co-applicants WDHY LLC, owner of lots 1, 11, 12, 13, and West Dixie LLC, owner of lots 7, 8, 9, and 10, with property addresses at 14090 West Dixie Highway, are jointly requesting the vacation, abandonment, and closure of city-owned alleyway and 2 abutting triangular parcels of unimproved land totaling approximately 15,108 square feet or 0.35 acres in size. That includes 2,248 square feet identified as lots A. If I may, draw your attention to the next page. The graphics on the next page will explain what lot A and what lot B is, and what the alleyway is, and what is the general block area that we are discussing here. So as I continue, 5,247 square feet identified as lot B, and a 20 feet wide alleyway measuring over 380 feet in length and consisting of 7,613 square feet, lying south of lots 1A and B. And if I may, on the very first diagram on the top of the page, you will see lot A and lot B identified. Those are the city-owned unimproved lands, and then the green line is the alleyway, and those 3 together comprise of the abandonment site.
Okay.
Um,
Again, for the record, I apologize. The city owns lots A and B in the diagram?
that's right, and the alleyway.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Um,
Do you have more to read?
If you would like me to finish the
Yes, please
background
finish it
information.
for the benefit
Okay.
of our viewers.
Yes, it is lying. And a 20 feet wide alleyway measuring over 380 feet in length and consisting of 7,613 square feet, lying south of lots 1A and B of Block 13, Biscayne Highlands subdivision, and adjacent to lots 7 through 13. See attached survey for details. That is in your backup.
Yes.
The co-applicants are in the process of communicating with the third property owner adjacent to the southern corner of the alleyway at 1211 Northeast 140th Street with folio 06-2219-015-2370, identified as Lot 6, in order to obtain a no objection statement to abandonment application in order to obtain the entire width of the alleyway. And then we have the diagram that I had just referred to. And that is the background information. And if I may, the applicant has submitted a letter of no objection from the said property owner.
That's on lot 6.
That is,
Lot 6?
that's right, yes.
So,
Okay.
since we got this, that has been
Yeah.
resolved.
Yes, so I think that it has just been forwarded on the dais.
All right, can we hear now from the proposed developer, sir? Please state your name and address for the record and talk to us for a minute, sir.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ari Sklar. I'm the architect for the clients. I'm working, my company's called Sklar Architecture. My office is at 2310 Hollywood Boulevard, Hollywood, Florida 33020. I happen to be in a group that owns some property in North Miami as well. Nothing to do with these properties. So I care about what goes on in the city as well. But my clients are Gabriel Buono from WDHY Inc. and Mr. Alberto Dayan from 14020 West Dixie LLC. And they're working together to improve the area. Mr. Buono, which is WDHY, recently purchased the property that's a vacant parcel. I have, if we can go to the presentation.
The vacant parcel would be lot 1.
The vacant parcel is lots 11, 12, and 13,
Lots 11, 12, and 13.
as well as lot 1.
So they purchased lot 1 as well.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I believe in the past year.
And what is on lots 2, 3, and 4?
Lots. Hold on.
We have private residences on 5 and 6, according to this information.
Correct. Lots 2, 3, and 4 going from east to west are residences, single-family
So
residences,
there are
yes.
single-family homes there as well. So
And
this-
they face northeast 141st Street.
Right,
Yes.
so we have a total of 5 single-family homes
Correct.
adjacent to this, okay?
Correct. Correct. Yes.
But it is already zoned commercial, correct? It's a C1 commercial?
Right,
And I understand the whole block is zoned commercial, yes.
All right, and that makes the homes a non-conforming use. Okay.
Okay. So oh, and I can go here. So I highlighted in the image above you. This is WDHY's property in yellow,
Okay.
and that triangle is the portion that they're proposing to take in as part of theirs, which will allow for a more beneficial use of the land and to do a more important development for the neighborhood. If you see, I go back, that's without it, and that's with it, along with a portion of the alley that corresponds, is the request. The next one is the other property owner, 14020 Dixie Highway LLC. They own the green portion that's highlighted there, and they're proposing to purchase that, the triangular portion that I just highlighted now.
Okay.
It jumps over, okay?
Are we,
I thought that was city.
are the
That's the city, that's the one, yeah,
plus the portions of.
correct.
Both triangle portions are the city.
Correct. They had separate. They could have applied separately, but it was determined it was better to apply together since they're adjacent. So
Mr.
that's why
Sklar,
this
are
is
we
a-
envisioning 2 buildings on this site, or are they envisioning a single building?
Presently, they are the green portion that's highlighted has an existing building. Okay, and he doesn't know exactly how he would further develop the property, depending upon how everything else comes about. But on the yellow, he's envisioning, we have some preliminary designs for a project, for a building, and I have, let's see, this is the vacant property right now on the northern end, on 141st. These are some photos that we took of the property, of the parcel. You can see now the sidewalk, there it is. The sidewalk is here from West Dixie going back. It doesn't cross the alley and it doesn't connect any farther back there. It just dies, the sidewalk. And this is the adjacent building from the adjacent property owner that's also making the request for the property behind. That's the existing building.
That would be lot 1.
That one is lot, no.
That'd be
It's
7, 8,
lots
9, wouldn't
10, 9, 8, and 7.
Oh, all right.
10, 9, 8, 7, okay.
That one. This is the front of lots 10, 9, 8, and 7, it's facing West Dixie. This is this is the side of the building, and here's the alley back here. This is lot 1 that is part of WDHY. And this is looking down the street. The other single-family residence is looking down the street. This is a view from 141st Street through the empty lot to West Dixie. And more photos of the back of the property. And down the alley. And you could see here that the sidewalk is very deteriorated. So as part of the improvement of the whole property and the new development, that would all be renovated and repaired. So here's a preliminary, if I may come around, here's a preliminary design that we have worked on in my office and in dealing with city staff, the planning department. I think seeing what could
It's conceptual.
it's conceptual what could occur on the property. I just want to see.
Well, it just went out, so we lost it all. There we go. So, you'll have to.
For some reason, it's a little bit stretched.
You'll need to stay with the microphone, though. I understand the limitation.
For some reason, I wanted to see it. It's a little bit stretched, distorted the picture. I don't know why. But,
We've seen that before.
Okay. So, floor plan wise, the initial idea is 3 stories because we had to balance out the parking. I believe we're allowed 5 stories, but the most we could get here was 3 stories because of the parking. And we were proposing retail on the ground floor and retail office above. The owners had thought initially that it would be nice to have a mixed-use project with residential above, but it's not allowed by the zoning at this time.
Again, this would mean the complete renovation or the removal of the existing stores that you have there?
No, this one is just the parcel on the north end. This is just lots 1. What I'm showing you now is a design for lots 1, 11, 12, and 13 that would incorporate the
That would be the south.
city land, lot A from the city. The one that was highlighted in yellow initially.
Right, so is that not the,
And let me just get a little further. We've developed this here, some interesting elevations to make it look really nice. And if I get to the 3Ds, you can see that whatever we're going to do, we're going to try to make it interesting for the community, for the neighborhood, not just a square box. My client
They
is...
were very landscape conscious in the city.
Yeah, we always do landscape, but landscape goes in after you figure out what you're going to build.
You're not doing yourself any favor by showing us a block.
Well, now, I wouldn't quite
the
say
truth,
that.
though.
I'd say
It's the truth.
anything that isn't simply a plain block is the potential
Right,
for
there's a
some
little bit of a-
architectural recognition somewhere down the road.
Right, right.
And
Well,
anything that could encourage that is certainly welcome.
I think something that's nice is my client is a developer of a number of projects, and he always looks to have a nice design. It's one of the reasons why he seeked us out, because we also don't like to just make a plain box. We like to do nice developments. So I think together we'll make a really good team, and this initial exploration lended to some interesting concepts and interesting architecture that could result, which, most of West Dixie Highway is.
Yes, we're
Very.
painfully aware of what most
Yeah,
of West Dixie
so-
Highway is like. Yes,
So,
you may,
If I could just,
Yes.
in reality, or conceptually speaking, I'm trying to figure out how to say this without getting myself in trouble here. With the fact that you have non-conforming use in lots 4, 3, and 2, the project could be more beneficial, or would you care to say that it would be more beneficial if in fact you would have that entire block that would include lots 4, 3, and 2?
I believe in the long run it would. Those are single family, and they have to approach all the owners. And ideally, there is a part of the code that says that if you have a minimum of 2 acres, I believe, you can request a change of zoning to have mixed use and some residential component as part of the development.
Some kind.
So I think that would be a goal of theirs, but part of it, they wanted to know if they could use the city property, if the city would be amicable to working with them and with the city property that's in between everything right now. So
Because
once
right now
we
you're
know,
disjointed.
I'm sorry.
Right now you have, what we see is very
It's jointed, yes, it's very disjointed, and the property owners get along, and they're discussing the possibility of doing something together. But once they know that this could move forward, then they can start exploring other ideas, and we can start exploring other concepts and show them what can be done.
You have 5 single-family houses on that lot, correct?
On the neighboring.
On
lot.
On the
same
neighboring,
side of that
1,
square.
2, 3, 4, 5, I believe, yes.
Now, what's gonna buffer the?
6.
the
I'm sorry, 6.
Now, is there gonna be some kind of a buffer between the project that you wanna do and the existing project?
5? I'm sorry, there were 5. Oh, yes, it's 5. It's 5. I'm sorry,
Five,
you're
there
right.
is 5.
Correct, it's 5. If it goes this way and the single-family residences remain, we would probably build a CBS wall, a concrete block wall, which is typically required when you're in separating a zoning between single-family and commercial, if it's suggested by the planning department. We would work with planning and landscaping and things, but we would work with the planning department to do what's the appropriate
Now,
thing.
but if they're non-conforming,
Mm-hmm.
is it not correct, Mr. Galdos, that they would not be legally responsible for asking those people for a buffer or?
Well, they can ask, and the developer can, in good gesture, neighborly, doesn't have to, because the non-conforming structures and the non-conforming uses here is not the commercial, it's actually these single-family residential dwellings. And
I'm a little bit confused. There's non-conforming now.
yes,
However, those houses have been there for 50 years.
that's why they're legally non-conforming, yes.
Okay. So they've been there a long time. So all of a sudden, you got this shopping center going up behind you, and now you're looking at somebody's car, or you're looking at somebody's garage, and that kind of diminishes their quality of life. And you know, I'm for I would hope the developer would go in there and try to make these people a fair offer, buy all 5 houses, and do a nice project. I mean, do a nice project, not a hodgepodge. You know, you mentioned it yourself, Mr. Architect. You said Dixie Highway's a mess. It's a mess. It's been that way ever since I can remember. I like to see some nice projects going there. You know, you go down the street, I look at the old Blue Royal Motel down there that should have been knocked down 40 years ago. I mean, it's like a hodgepodge. I mean, and you guys are going to invest good money. How about looking at those other 5 houses, and how about doing a nice project? And you said, you know, you can go 5 stories there. Well, why not entertain the possibility of putting a parking garage over there and building something nice on it? You know, maybe you can change the economics of that neighborhood by having something attractive other than some more low-end stuff out there. And that's what it looks like. I'll be honest with you. You know, I mean,
Kenny, and the reality, as I see it, is that if the 5 houses were bought out, the lot as a whole would be far more developable. I could see the 5 stories, and God only knows where our land development regulations are going to take us the next 2 years as we begin the rewrite on this. And there may even be options for bonuses of some kind, depending upon how the LDR is put together as we approach Dixie Highway redevelopment. I would hope that these 2 neighboring investors would have the greater vision, because the project as a whole would have so much more value if the homeowners could be agreeably bought out. The possibilities are just so much greater, because otherwise we do wind up with another hodgepodge of a series of small buildings, lower height, that never reach their potential, where parking will remain a perennial problem. However, having said that, that by itself is no reason not to support this project. What I would go to is take a look at what the offers that are on the table, and I would suggest to staff and to this commission, if we were to go with this, we should be taking a look at what amounts to pages 5 and 6 as to some of the conditions here, one of which is the 90% value rate. On a small project, I don't think I'd be inclined to endorse a discount. I think if they bought the 5 houses, yes, give them a discount, but I don't know. I would be inclined to say the city ought to go for the full appraised value and maximize their return and not look back. But of course, that would take a resolution of this commission. And before we get to that point, we have to open the public hearing and allow people to speak to this issue. So at this point in time, without further ado,
May I ask some clarification of staff?
yes, go ahead.
We're discussing the sale of Lot 1 Lot A and Lot B.
Right, really
But-
just the two little triangular parcels in
But-
the alleyway.
But here it comes. Is this another case? I can't quite find it. Maybe it's in the works. Maybe it's staring me right in the face. Are we vacating the lot at a certain cost? Is it a sale, or is it just?
There is an appraisal in there.
And-
Yeah,
and
the
are we-
appraisal is for Lot A, triangular lot number 1, Lot B, triangular lot number 2, and the alleyway. It's all three combined.
Okay, and it's as far as I can tell, it seems like it's bifurcated or trifurcated. It's not. I should say.
It's a package deal.
It's a
They're
package
all
deal, yeah,
three
'cause-
pieces go together.
Yeah, because the alleyway, more than anything, is really what commands a lot of value. It allows the expansion of each of the lots on West Dixie. It allows the bridging across to the two triangular parcels. And I just want a clarification on that, because in the past, we've vacated alleys, and I thought it was quite outrageous that we did not put a value on that.
Well,
That's
there
probably-
is a new city ordinance that was put in thanks to Maureen Horowitz a couple of years ago that requires us to sell these. We cannot vacate them any
After we
longer.
did where TD Bank is and.
Unless it's
and
some
Burger
little
King.
tiny, few square feet of something.
Right.
But otherwise, we have to sell this.
And I had talked to Roland earlier today regarding this, with the assessment that it is a city, the city hired the appraiser to appraise the property. My question on the alleyway again was, she presented us with comparison values, but the alleyway, to me, since it's an integral part, I still don't understand where she came up with that appraised amount, seemingly because of the fact that Mr. Prevotel said, I question whether or not it was undervalued in the appraisal, quite frankly, because
Yeah,
of
'cause-
the importance of it being a connecting factor.
Yeah, they become significantly more valuable,
Right.
each of the lots. It's a really
So it
Smart
seemed to
direction
be-
for the
seemed to be
developers.
comparisons on those appraisals with other like properties within the area.
That is correct. The consultant did do appraisal, and they are doing this on a regular basis. And there is, as you said, a package deal. An alleyway, if it fronts a certain type of property, it's appraised a certain way, and that's basically what the report states.
So
That's the value.
And the market value.
That's the value.
Not
Yes.
as Mr. Seyfried has brought out, I would support that we take it at full market value, and not 90%.
Because even in that is, even though they're saying the highest and greatest land use and land value, it really depends on your perspective. And if you have that existing adjacent parcel, and it's going to expand you that much to be able to get that much higher, that much wider, your setbacks to a much more developable lot, that's worth a whole lot more than someone just coming in from off the street and buying those true triangles and that which they could do just about nothing with. Or I should say, maybe with the appraised value, they could do the appraised value on those two triangles and the alleyway.
Precisely, it's going to be a
But
process.
It's going to be of much greater value to the existing property people, but I'm sure that's not a secret.
No, and unfortunately, none of us has a crystal ball, and we cannot foresee the demands of the property owners that are there as to what they'd be willing to sell their houses for. Don't know what they'd appraise for. Clearly, the parcel would have much greater value if they could acquire all of that, and you're right, it would be a much more interesting project. However, that's not before us.
Right.
We can only deal with the appraisal on the alleyway and the two triangles and hope for the best. So at this point, we'll open the public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak to this matter is invited to step forward, state your name and address. And, ladies and gentlemen, we have a speaker tonight. Well, come on up.
Come on up. My name is Barbara Dabney, and I'm the owner of 13870 West Dixie Highway, just south of the property that you're trying to develop.
Not one of the parcels that's up for discussion tonight, but
One
further
south of it,
Okay.
yeah, close to the blue building that
Yes, that
commented
famous
about.
blue building, yes.
And I would actually like to encourage you to vote in favor of this type of a promotion, because regardless whether they have a chance to purchase these additional homes in the back and to develop the whole lot, which is kind of a monumental task at this point in time. But as you can see, what's happening on West Dixie Highway, and we're trying to do and edge into it little by little to try to improve. And I'm trying to do the same thing, and I've been having a lot of hurdles that I've had to cut. And I have a similar situation, but the lots behind there are catch-alls for people, thieves, drug dealers, whatever's going on back there. The trash that's being dumped there on a regular basis is just obscene. You're having all the people coming in, having to remove it all the time. I don't know if you have that similar situation up there, but I would only assume so because we're only a block apart. And I'm always fighting with that. And so I think it would be in your best interest to get this property on our tax roll and getting it built on and created. And I mean, you can always work with them on the design and the format, and it's a start. And that's improve West Dixie Highway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak to this item tonight? Well, hearing no thundering, heard, seeing no rising. Oh, a young man is coming forward. Yes, sir. State your name and address.
Thank you for the young man. My name is Gabriel Boano. I am part of the team that we are trying to do the new development.
So you're one of the purchaser, owner scenario? Okay.
Exactly.
Please,
The
I'm sorry,
developer.
state your address for the record.
Sorry?
Your address for the
Where
record.
do you live, sir?
I live on 9434 West Blackview Drive on Bay Harbor. We are doing several projects on Bay Harbor. We are doing some development there. And I love the idea that you propose to try to acquire the house that they are behind to our parcel.
Actually, the 5 houses,
Yeah, the 5 houses. That is no easy task. It's
No.
something that is going to take time. And I think this can be even done on different phases. I think we can approach the development on different phases. And if you allow to acquire this alley and the 2 parcels that we try to purchase, is going to be a nice step forward to keep working with the city to development at least a phase 1 part of this project, that maybe we can incorporate the rest on the later or on the second phase.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. I
And-
hope I can start to work with the city of North Miami the same way that I am doing with Bay Harbor. That
We are hopeful. Yes, sir.
thank you.
Thank you.
And since there's no one else to come forward, we shall close the public hearing.
I just have one
Yes.
question, if I may. Can I ask the developer, the architect, a question? What do you kind of a barricade are you going to put between yourself, or what kind of aesthetics are you going to put between your project and those 5 residential homes? Is there anything that we're required to do by statute here in our ordinances?
We will be working with the planning department as we always have. My father's an architect, my uncle's an architect here. A lot of people know our family, and they know we always do good projects. We'll always try to do the right thing. If we need landscaping, we put landscaping. If we need a wall, we put a wall. Or if we can, the city was talking about a piece of art in the corner because of the shape of the corner, and it's something very visible. So we consider all those elements when we're working on the design. Right now, it's very conceptual. We don't have anything exactly set.
I don't have a problem with you doing the project. In fact, I welcome it. I wish you would go buy all 5 of them, knock all that garbage down, and go 5 stories. I really
Well,
do. But I know that's not before.
don't
but
call
what
someone's private home garbage, but I
No,
understand
I'm not
where you're
talking
coming
about
from.
like the Blue Royal
You
and all
know?
that, not their homes. Let me rephrase that before I
Yeah, let's
Those
rephrase
5
that.
residents, for the record, I was not referring to the 5 residents as garbage, but the hodgepodge projects that you do have on Dixie Highway. Like, I don't want to be like the president and say that we don't have a strategy. We do have a strategy.
Right.
All right. I would just hope that we would put some kind of a barrier between your project and those existing residents right now, where they're not looking at a a sterile wall and, you know, just diminishing their quality of life. Ideally, I'd like to see that you know, you guys do purchase it eventually and have a nice project over there. And if I did offend those homeowners, it certainly was not my intent, but I am looking out for your benefit because I do want to see them have an aesthetically pleasing view when they look out through their backyards. Thank
I
you.
was going to say, if you look at the photos that I presented, I have them up here again if you want. I mean, it's pretty barren, and nobody really takes care of it.
Driven
Right.
through our city
So-
numerous times.
Hopefully, what we
Painfully
do will be nicer.
You know, I look at that hotel that down the street there, the Blue Royal, and when I came here in 1970, that should have been ripped down then, you know. And like you say, Dixie Highway, you can go all the way up to County Line Road and it's a hodgepodge, you know. But I do see it being improved south of the city, down there in the shores. I see, you know, where it ends. It's starting to come out, and hopefully you can do that. I wish you well. Thank you.
All right, Mr. James, you have a question?
Yes, I just wanted to confirm that the plans that have been presented today, they're not locked in. This is just conceptual in nature, right?
That is correct. It's just
Okay.
conceptual.
All right. Cool. I'd like to make a motion.
Well, I'd like, before we make the motion, if I could.
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if I'd like to address the firm, the architectural firm, and without making a commitment of support or denial, I'd like to express an appreciation that this is not a project where we've seen so many projects where it's been the same monoblock and they have the minimal amount of puncture windows and they put on the shutters or the window boxes and you know, they get away with a paint line to create any sense of attraction to it. And it does seem that this has been more studied, and it's more playful. There's something else going on, that there's been some effort exerted here, which we don't see in all projects. And so I think that should be supported. And as we go further, as I've mentioned this, for whatever the structure is in our city, that we keep promoting things that have shown a little bit more interest, a little bit more attention to their siting or what they have to offer. With that
Thank you.
said, you're welcome. And with that said, it would be nice that this site, this could be built, but it would be nice if the site could be a little bit further developed to be able, so that it would not have so much the sprawl of parking on it. That possibly the building might turn the corner and go west and have some covered parking there. If it could be economically feasible, it might be a way of turning the corner at the street and West Dixie Highway and further enlightening. I think following through on what you've been trying to do, what you've somewhat achieved with the stairwell. But what this would do is take away another thing that has bugged me, which is this constant sprawl of surface parking. And if we can somehow minimize that, I think that would also be appreciated by the city. And by somehow structuring it or putting it underneath the building, it'll be more desirable for the people who are going to be using this property. It'll be possibly a little bit safer, gets it above the water line. There's so many benefits. And aesthetically, I think there are some positive things to be said about that, if that could be considered. Should we make our motion now?
Yes, Chair will entertain a motion.
I'd like a motion to approve.
Mr. James moves to approve. Mr. Pervitel seconds. All in favor? Aye. Let the record reflect the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Congratulations, Mr. Scar. We wish you every success.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.
Good
All
luck,
right,
guys.
before everybody beats the feet for the door, guys, we got a couple of little things to play with here.
And that was with the full value, right?
Yes, and the recommendation was for full value.
For full value.
Yes, not for 90%, for full value. City council can do what they choose.
That's,
Ari, you heard that, right? I mean, the condition has been modified for full value. It's gonna go with the same
council.
recommendations to the city council. Yes, that would be, September 23rd. Yes, sir. No, it's not gonna be consent agenda, so make a presentation. Yes, sir. That'll be the final approval. Thank you. Thanks.
Well, not necessarily has to be said. All right, well, thank you very much, gentlemen. All right, guys, before we get out of here, one last thing I again want to bring to your attention. The Sea Level Rise Task Force final report and recommendations. You were all given a pile of documentation 2 months ago. My concerns as we move into the land development regulations is incorporating issues and recommendations from this report into our land development regulations going forward. We have a lot of waterfront property in Keystone Point, aging seawalls in some conditions, bridges that may be now considered too low in light of this report. Perhaps as new development comes in, we'll have to have the buildings built at higher levels than has previously been the case. And we have 47 or 49 or 50 some odd pumping stations, of which we're rebuilding 5 a year. And this is going to require us to increase the standards on the pumping stations to raise them above potential floodwater damage, because once you build a pumping station, it tends to be there a very long time. And if you build it too low, the costs to rebuild it were going to be astronomical. I expect no input tonight, but I wanted to let you know that we're watching this, we're aware of it. I ask all of you to go back and review the recommendations contained in that report so that as we move into the next iteration of our land development regulations, we will keep our eyes open and keep these issues in consideration, because it's going to have a series of broad impacts across our city. And we need to go into our next set of LDRs with our eyes wide open.
And to that point, Mr. Chairman, would the staff being aware of it, is there a plan or is there a strategy to address those within the regulations so that they're pinpointed as additions or modifications to the land use, if it need be taken?
Yes, Commissioner.
So that we
Staff
don't
has
have to go
already.
hunt and search when this time comes, when we all sit down and we have these hearings and everything else, that I think those points should be highlighted so that we know that the city is going to address, let's say, 25 items of concern addressing sea level rise. If those can be highlighted for us in the future.
Yes, that is going to, staff is already cognizant of that. Staff is working and participating in all climate change workshops, seminars, policies, proposing policies. Staff, I actually, as part representing the city, attended a sea level summit, sea level rise summit last week, where adaptation areas, action adaptation areas were discussed. There are other workshops and seminars coming up where staff will be participating at other various events. And I would like to draw the attention as part of that reply to this media release that was provided to you on page 2. City, as everyone knows, was awarded a national recognition for their efforts on climate and environmental awareness. And the department's housing section has these environmental and energy efficiency guidelines put in place since 2011, for which that award was given to the city. So the staff is already on board with it. Staff is already working on the issue, so to speak.
That's going to be important, because I can imagine how many of our homeowners are not, and they will look at those issues and say, why? So we need to be ready for that. Yes.
All these homeowners in the housing program that qualify, the guidelines state that all 100% energy efficient retrofits must be done with those homes. So that is our own rule, which we follow to the letter.
Yes, well, that's certainly appreciated. I'm more concerned with increasing the height of everything, to account for rising floodwaters. You see,
Yeah, and
yes, you see that. Yes, great that we have energy efficient appliances. They won't do you much good if they're underwater. So,
Well,
We-
what I was trying to say was that
Yes.
it's part of a bigger,
We
bigger
understand.
comprehensive,
Well, can
we do
plan.
understand.
Can I touch on the,
Chairman?
Yes.
I'm sorry. You know what? I just want to thank the staff. You guys work awful hard, and I was looking through this packet, and I said, geez, you guys really put together a nice package. Month in, month out, you guys really do a good job.
You're here.
And thank you.
It's
Thank you very
immensely
much.
challenging, and
Anyway.
we understand that.
Oh, we appreciate it. The staff appreciates it. I will
Really do.
communicate to the rest of the department.
May-
Thank
may,
you.
May I take the opportunity? I know the board has already heard my appeal to this, but since you're relatively new and it tails into what we just talked before and the rising waters, and that is that we have a situation in our zoning where you have a parcel and people will build their building, residential or commercial, and it was shown by the consultants. This half is the building and it goes up 3-4 stories, and this half, the remaining part of the lot, is the parking lot, sprawled edge to edge. So it's either building or surface parking. I said, well, do we really want that? And what happens is we keep getting this situation of the building down to the ground and the sprawl of parking because we have a height restriction that does not exclude the surface or the parking, structured parking below. If that was not counted in their height calculation, and here's your building, and they said, oh, really? You'll allow me to go up to allow the parking to go underneath, so this can then be left green. It's a win-win for everybody. It's a better. They're going to pay a little bit more to raise it up, but it'll be better for the neighbors. It'll be a cooler environment. It'll be a safer environment. It's less buggy for the building. It's better for hurricanes. And when that big flood does come by, it'll be one less building that the city will have to worry about. Because
Yes,
we're going to
well-
have plenty of problems as it is when that big flood comes.
As-
So if everything was raised up and not penalizing the new person, whether it's residential or single family or multifamily, if we can get that, and it doesn't have to look like stilts.
As you know, Bill,
Exactly.
It doesn't have to
those
look
of
like-
us here
Yeah.
are the enlightened ones. And we recognize the flaw in those LDRs when they were approved and argued against that issue then. But, the east side was adamant they didn't want a tall building. And so this is going to be the big battle to be fought on the next round of LDRs to not penalize buildings for the parking
The
garage.
structure, especially if they can show
So,
that they're
We
they're
all
trading
need
off
to
if
know
they're
it's
providing
coming. We
exterior
need to be
space,
ready and go
vegetated
into it
space.
with our eyes wide open.
Yeah, I look and this last couple of months, there was an article in the local Miami Herald, and I look at Bay Harbor Island. 21 projects going on over there, new, nice projects. I'd like to see 21 nice, beautiful projects, high-rises going on in this community.
We all
know,
would.
I
We'd
mean-
like to see 21 of anything new going in here.
It's
Anything nice going anywhere already. Yeah.
Sure.
we can bury our heads with.
All right, our next meeting will be Tuesday, October 7th. Is everybody in town for Tuesday, October 7th?
Should be.
I can't think that far ahead.
You can't think that far ahead. All right.
I'm retired.
He's retired. All right, the rest of us, yes, I will be here on October 7th. Okay? Very good. Thank you very much. Nothing else. This meeting stands adjourned.
Thank you all.
Yes, indeed. Thank you all for your cooperation. Your